Hollywood has always been obsessed with image, but what if the posters lied, the fan mags covered up, and the studio bosses outright erased whole chapters of their stars' real lives? Buckle up because we're ripping back the velvet curtain and diving headfirst into the world of bisexual heartthrobs the studios didn't want you to know about. Ever wondered which legends and modern icons were living double lives hiding in plain sight? Stick around, because this ride is about to get seriously unpredictable. Rock Hudson. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Rock Hudson, the square-jawed heartthrob who defined Hollywood's golden era of romance. On screen, Hudson was the king of the straight-arrow leading men, the blueprint for every brooding romantic hero who followed. Off-screen, a completely different movie. Hudson's bisexuality was an open secret among industry insiders, but to the world, he was strictly the all-American dreamboat, thanks to the iron grip of studio PR teams who threatened, bribed, and at times destroyed careers to keep their golden boy's image squeaky clean. It wasn't just his personal life they kept under wraps. It was a strategy. Every relationship with a man was buried beneath fake dates and staged romances with starlets.
Reckon it got a mite too close in here for your partner.
Hudson's story exposes the harsh reality of what it meant to be queer in old Hollywood. You could have the looks, the talent, the fans, but you couldn't have the truth. It's no exaggeration to say the studio system turned his real self into a role, even more exhausting than anything he ever played for the cameras. Even now, decades after his passing, Hudson's legacy forces us to question how many more stories like his remain hidden, collecting dust in studio vaults and tabloid archives. Tab Hunter. Tab Hunter was the original California golden boy, surfer hair, dazzling smile, the whole 9 yards. But beneath the perfect tan and that starched white-collar image, there was a very real, very nervous young man trying to survive a Hollywood hell-bent on selling him as America's clean-cut sweetheart. Tab was gay and bisexual, juggling secret relationships while starring in films that doubled down on wholesome romance. The real kicker? His studio signed him to contracts that not only dictated his roles, but also his friends, hangouts, and public dates. When rumors got too close for comfort, Tab found himself accidentally splashed across gossip columns with beautiful actresses, none of whom were actually his type.
That's what keeps me single. Hello, I'm Tab Hunter, and I've got a secret.
He even dated Anthony Perkins, but that story was so hush-hush, it took decades and Hunter's own memoir for the truth to come out. Tab's life was a tightrope walk. One side was the dream, the other a daily panic attack.
Something the matter, kid?
What?
Oh, no, not a...
Like the fine Tab Hunter?
Well, you do pretty good.
If you think today's coming-out stories are brave, imagine doing it when a single photo could end your career, your friendships, and maybe your safety. Tab finally reclaimed his truth with his book and a killer documentary, giving Hollywood's most airbrushed era a little more depth and a lot more honesty. Anthony Perkins. Alfred Hitchcock made him a household name with Psycho, but Anthony Perkins' real-life drama was as riveting as anything on the big screen. A darling of the sensitive young man typecast, Perkins became the poster boy for repressed energy. Little did moviegoers know, most of that repression was real. He navigated the industry as a bisexual man in an era when one slip could kill your career faster than Norman Bates' mother with a kitchen knife. Perkins carried on a long-term, deeply passionate relationship with Tab Hunter, the kind of love story that would have headlined every fan magazine if it had been straight. But this was the 50s, and studios were experts at making sure no one caught a whiff of scandal.
Well, there's not much to tell, really. I don't even know where she lives anymore. I've got her photograph.
You've got her photograph.
Perkins was pushed into beard relationships and steered away from roles that might draw unwanted attention. Even as he married and started a family, the dual life never truly ended. Today, Perkins's story is a powerful reminder that the golden glow of Hollywood was often a smokescreen. Beneath the suits, the scripts, and the careful choreography, he was fighting just to be himself, an all-too common struggle that left deep scars. But in the years since, his truth has inspired a new generation to call out Hollywood's hypocrisy. Cesar Romero. Cesar Romero, the silver screen's dashing Latin lover and the man who later painted his face as the Joker, had a personal life far more colorful than any of his roles. Known for that trademark pencil-thin mustache and a steady stream of on-screen conquests, Romero was a bisexual heartthrob who navigated Hollywood's labyrinth of secrets with wit and charm. Studios marketed him as the ultimate ladies' man, arranging dates and planting stories to keep up appearances.
It's been an unpleasant day. Your husband pays me to run his plantation, not to be killed by the heat.
But insiders knew the real deal. Romero was a regular at private parties where actors could relax, drop the mask, and be themselves, at least for a few hours. Still, he maintained an almost acrobatic double life, careful not to cross the invisible line that could end everything. Hollywood was obsessed with his ethnic appeal, using it to break barriers on screen while simultaneously policing his love life behind closed doors. Romero never went public, but he never really denied anything either. His easy confidence and refusal to cave to pressure made him a cult figure in the queer community long before the word icon was trending. Today, fans and historians are finally putting the pieces together, uncovering a story that's as flamboyant and layered as any of his best performances. Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr was the tough-as-nails star of Perry Mason and Ironside, but his real life was more fragile than any courtroom drama. Burr was a classic example of Hollywood's scorched earth policy on sexuality. Studios erased his actual relationships from the record and manufactured a personal history that was pure fiction. Married, widowed, father, all invented, all to keep the myth alive and the cameras rolling. Burr had deep, long-term relationships with men, some lasting decades, but the public never saw a hint of it.
Now, Dad, blame it. Let's have the whole
A
truth.
good art is like music. It should be enjoyed, not dissected.
Interviews were closely managed, and any reporter who got too nosy quickly found themselves blacklisted. Burr's personal files, maintained by the studio, read like a spy novel, aliases, fake family members, and layers of subterfuge to keep the secret safe. The tragic irony? Burr's biggest strength, his gravitas, that quiet intensity, came from a life spent guarding the truth. Off camera, he supported LGBTQ causes quietly, helping friends who were less able to hide. The studios may have kept his story buried, but Burr's resilience shines through, a testament to living authentically, even when the world demands a mask. Clifton Webb. Clifton Webb was the master of sophisticated wit, an actor who could make audiences swoon or shudder with nothing more than a sly glance. Best known for his roles in Laura and Sitting Pretty, Webb was the very image of dapper masculinity, a man whose every gesture dripped with old-world charm. But that surface was, as with so many others, carefully engineered. Behind the scenes, Webb lived as a bisexual man in a city obsessed with straight narratives. Webb never married, and while gossip columnists circled like sharks, the studio always stepped in to rewrite the script. His closest relationships were with men, but in public, he was painted as a lifelong bachelor too devoted to his mother, whom he lived with for decades, to be tied down.
Not 20, mind you, or 26, but 28 times.
Insiders whispered about his legendary Hollywood parties, where the guest list was as exclusive as the secrets being traded. But outside that rarefied circle, Webb was expected to keep up the charade. What makes Webb's story especially fascinating is how he embraced ambiguity. He didn't bother to chase after approval from the tabloids or the bosses. He let his acting speak, choosing roles that allowed a little subtext to slip through for those in the know. Today, that subtle defiance is part of his enduring legacy. Webb played the game, but he played by his own rules. Durk Bogard. Durk Bogard was Britain's answer to James Dean, a brooding, magnetic presence who ruled the silver screen and the nation's heart. But Bogard's private life was pure spy thriller. He carried out a long-term, deeply loving relationship with his manager, Tony Forwood, while performing the ultimate disappearing act for the press. Studios, and even some fans, suspected, but no one dared speak out in the buttoned-up 1950s. Bogard's bisexuality was wrapped in layers of coded language. In interviews, he dodged, parried, and sidestepped questions about romance.
And you know how it is in show business, don't you? Well, in show business, you have to kind of put on an act.
Publicists paired him with suitable actresses for red carpet events, and any sign of a deeper truth was smoothed over, erased, or redirected. Yet the pain of living a double life haunted Bogard. He later wrote movingly about the loneliness and exhaustion of Hollywood's closet, even as he stopped short of explicitly outing himself. What set Bogard apart was his refusal to cave entirely to the machinery around him. He took on roles that pushed the envelope. Think Victim 1961, one of the first British films to deal with homosexuality head-on. The result? Critical acclaim, backlash, and a legacy that's only grown with time. Bogard's life wasn't just a balancing act, it was a quiet rebellion, one that paved the way for others to follow their truth in the glare of the spotlight. Talula Bankhead. Talula Bankhead was the original wild child, witty, unpredictable, and impossible to control. If you think Hollywood bad girl is a modern invention, you haven't met Talula. With her deep, whiskey-soaked voice and a laugh that could shake the rafters, Bankhead was a headline writer's dream.
Live half this way once, why not live a little?
But beneath the outrageous quotes and endless parties, she was living a reality the public wasn't allowed to see. Bankhead was unabashedly open in private about her attraction to both men and women. The studio's solution? Send in the spin doctors. Tales of her eccentricities were planted in the press to distract from her actual relationships, while her romantic escapades with women were buried deep enough to keep censors and sponsors happy.
How things go here at home?
Oh, frightful, darling. The phone woke me at the crack of noon. No call.
In a less controlled era, Talula would have been a queer icon. Instead, she became a symbol of everything dangerous about independent women. She never played by Hollywood's rules, refusing to apologize for her appetite for life, love, and scandal. Friends said Talula lived in a category of her own, and her story proves it. Studios tried to sanitize her image, but she turned notoriety into legend, making it clear that no amount of spin could dull her brilliance. Today, Talula's name still sparks rumors, and more than a few grins from those who know the real story. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's life was a series of standing ovations and heartbreaks, a voice that could stop time, and a story that could break your heart. Everyone knows about Dorothy and the Yellow Brick Road, but the path Garland walked in real life was a maze of secrets, pressures, and unspoken truths. Hollywood loved her talent but hated her independence, and her desirability was just another thing to be hidden or denied. Garland had relationships with both men and women, yet the studio bosses built her public persona on fairy tale romance with men only.
You are the most precocious, overconfident, spoiled young man I've ever had the misfortune to meet.
Her close, often romantic friendships with women were dismissed as emotional dependency or simply not talked about. Studio heads micromanaged every aspect of her image, from her wardrobe to her weight to her love life, all to maintain the illusion of innocence and marketability. Offstage, Garland was open about her feelings in trusted circles, a risk that could have ended her career overnight.
We could sell the idea to Mr. Judd.
Mr. Judd, the principal?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought the last time you saw him...
Well, no, I don't
She
think
surrounded herself with other queer artists and became a beacon for fans who saw themselves reflected in her struggle and resilience. Garland's private truth added depth to every performance, especially for those who read between the lines. Her legend survives not just because of her voice, but because she lived and loved far beyond the roles Hollywood tried to force on her. Vincent Price. Vincent Price was horror royalty, a man whose voice alone could send chills down your spine and who oozed charisma in everything from classic chillers to campy cult hits. But for all his flamboyance on screen, Price's private life was a shadowy script the studios never wanted the public to see. Bisexuality in old Hollywood was treated like a horror story, and Price's personal relationships became just another tale to be locked in the vault.
Thank you, and welcome to my Halloween special.
While he married and fathered children, Price's circle of friends and lovers included many men. In public, he was cast as a bon vivant, the perfect dinner guest for any starlet or socialite. Behind closed doors, he was open-minded, progressive, and unapologetically himself. He even supported early LGBTQ causes long before it was safe, popular, or even legal to do so. Yet every attempt to bring his truth to light was met with studio pushback, corrected press releases, and relentless rumors. What's left is a legacy as complex as the man himself. a performer who made a career out of unmasking monsters while living in a world that demanded he keep his real face hidden. Price's story proves that true icons don't just survive the system, they transcend it, even if history has to play catch-up. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando wasn't just a heartthrob, he was the original Hollywood rebel, redefining masculinity one smoldering glare at a time. But if you thought his off-screen life was any less dramatic, think again. Brando's bisexuality is still tiptoed around in the official biographies, but dig just a little, and the truth bubbles up.
This close-shaved chin-up, who right now somewhere is marching along the proper approach, the proper you.
He was as fluid in love as he was in his method acting, reportedly involved with both men and women, refusing to play by anyone's rules, least of all the studios. For Brando, Hollywood's PR machine was just another script to tear up. Still, the bosses at MGM and Paramount weren't about to let their leading man be seen as anything but virile and aggressively heterosexual. Tabloid whispers brushed aside, real stories buried deeper than Brando's own private life. Even his friendships with actors like Wally Cox were recast as bachelor buddies, despite insiders knowing better. What made Brando dangerous wasn't just his talent, it was his refusal to be boxed in. He once said, "Like a large number of men, I too have had homosexual experiences, and I am not ashamed." That might not sound radical today, but back then, it was career self-slaughter. Brando didn't care. He played roles, lived wild, and left a mess for the PR team, proving real legends are always more complicated than their press releases. Charles Lawton. Charles Lawton was the actor's actor, a chameleon who could shift from chilling villain to bumbling anti-hero in a heartbeat. But in real life, Lawton was cast in a far more dangerous role, the closeted bisexual genius. Married to Elsa Lanchester, he lived with one foot in the spotlight and the other in a shadow, thanks to an industry that wasn't about to let its Oscar winner live out loud. Studio bosses loved Lawton's gravitas but hated the risk. Rumors about his relationships with men were swiftly swatted away, and Elsa, who knew the truth, played the dutiful wife for the cameras. Lawton's talent was his shield, but the stress of leading a double life haunted him.
And subsequently in arranging the marriage, you lied to the authorities?
He channeled that tension into his performances. His Captain Bligh wasn't just tyrannical, he was wounded. His Quasimodo, more vulnerable than a monster. Offset, Lawton found community in Hollywood's underground circles, but he never got the freedom to claim his full story. His bisexuality was one more inconvenient fact for publicists to edit out, an open secret whispered about at dinner parties, but erased from magazine profiles. The truth is, Lawton's best performances weren't just on film. They were in surviving a system stacked against anyone who didn't fit the mold. Bert Lancaster. Bert Lancaster cut an imposing figure, rugged, athletic, and smoldering in everything from Here to Eternity to Elmer Gantry. He was the kind of guy Hollywood adored, so long as he played by the rules. But off-screen, Lancaster's life was anything but the simple hero's journey the studio painted. His bisexuality was known within certain Hollywood circles, and the studio system went into overdrive to keep that information firmly under wraps. For years, the press pushed the image of Lancaster as the perfect ladies' man. But insiders saw through the facade. Lancaster had close relationships with both men and women, and while he was discreet, he didn't exactly go out of his way to squash the whispers. The tension between his public persona and his private reality was as dramatic as anything in his films. When Lancaster's friendships with men got too much attention, PR teams swooped in to create new romantic headlines or leak strategic gossip.
Well, if you happen to see this, you'll have only one direction to travel from there.
Even now, the full story of Bert Lancaster's life is still emerging. He remains proof that the old studio system was expert at spinning myth out of reality, especially when it came to the desirability of its biggest stars. The truth? Lancaster was more than a tough guy. He was a complex, passionate, and unapologetically real human being. Freddy Mercury. If there was ever a man who lived like there was no tomorrow, it was Freddy Mercury. Queen's frontman was pure spectacle, dazzling audiences with that 4-octave voice and larger-than-life stage presence. But while Mercury's flamboyance seemed impossible to hide, his bisexuality was another story, one that record labels and publicists were all too eager to bury. Mercury had relationships with both men and women. His great love, Mary Austin, inspired Love of My Life, but he also found passion with men like Jim Hutton. Despite his private openness, Mercury's management insisted on keeping things ambiguous. In interviews, Mercury would wink, tease, and deflect, playing the game but never giving the press the full story. The result? Fans speculated, tabloids hunted, but the real truth only emerged later, when Mercury's courage and tragedy forced the world to pay attention. Freddie's refusal to let anyone define him, on stage or off, was his greatest rebellion. His desirability and the secrecy surrounding it added a raw, aching honesty to his music. Even as the world tried to stuff him back in the closet, Mercury exploded out of it, becoming not just a rock icon, but a symbol for anyone who ever felt pressure to hide. David Bowie. David Bowie, the chameleon, the spaceman, the star who turned gender and desirability into a glittering cosmic playground. While Bowie's style was bold enough to scare the suits at every record label, his bisexuality still got the classic studio treatment. Dodge, deny, spin, repeat. Bowie himself once quipped, "I'm gay, and always have been," only to later describe himself as bisexual, leaving fans and industry insiders forever guessing where art ended and life began. It wasn't just his look that freaked out the business types. It was the total freedom with which he explored love, lust, and identity. Behind the scenes, labels and managers desperately tried to steer his image back to something marketable, but Bowie was never going to play along. His relationships with men and women were often as public as the industry would allow, but that didn't stop attempts to sand down the edges of his persona. Bowie's bisexuality wasn't just a detail. It was part of his artistic DNA, fueling classics like Rebel Rebel and turning his every reinvention into a statement of independence. He made ambiguity cool, turning the studio's worst nightmare into the secret of his everlasting appeal. Bowie's message? Don't fit the mold. Shatter it. Megan Fox. Megan Fox has always been Hollywood's bad girl with a megawatt smirk, and her status as a pin-up icon was no accident. For years, the press drooled over her high-profile romances with men, while the studios doubled down on marketing her as the ultimate straight fantasy. What they didn't want you to know?
A balcony, stainless steel appliances, and I'm guessing someone with extreme OCD that lives here to keep this place clean.
Fox has always played by her own rules, and her bisexuality was an open secret among those who actually listened. Long before Instagram made coming out a casual affair, Fox was candid about her attraction to women, telling GQ in 2008, "I have no question in my mind about being bisexual." But the response from publicists? Pure panic. She was told to tone it down, that honesty would cost her leading roles and brand deals.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I not your type?
That's not what I said.
Are you only into like hockey groupies? You would prefer?
In interviews, you could see the coded language, the playful deflections, always a wink, never a full reveal. Yet, Fox never really hid. Instead, she used her platform to challenge assumptions about what a coitus symbol could be. She didn't need the studio's approval to validate her experience, and her honesty paved the way for other actresses to own their desirability without apology. Today, Fox stands as proof that Hollywood's old-school tactics don't work when you refuse to play nice or straight. Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga didn't just crash the music scene, she set it on fire, stomping on every convention the industry held dear. But even as she belted out anthems for outsiders and wrapped herself in raw meat, her desirability became a point of endless debate. Gaga has always identified as bisexual, and she's spoken openly about loving women as well as men. Still, her handlers and labels tried to keep her desirability as ambiguous as possible, mysterious, edgy, but never quite concrete. In her early interviews, Gaga talked about her relationships with women, but you could almost hear the nervous coughs from her management in the background. They were terrified that clarity would alienate her mainstream audience, so her image was packaged as queer-friendly rather than outright queer. But Gaga, being Gaga, didn't care. She kept pushing, making her bisexuality part of her persona, whether the industry liked it or not. The irony? Her refusal to tone it down is exactly what made her a superstar. Gaga's visibility and unapologetic approach have inspired millions to embrace their own fluidity. Her story proves that you can't keep a true original in the closet, even if you try to sell millions of records on the way. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday's voice could melt steel, but the world was never ready for the full heat of her story. Lady Day is an icon of jazz and heartbreak, her life a catalog of triumph over adversity. What never made the liner notes? Holiday's bisexuality. In a world that barely tolerated her race or her independence, adding queer to her public image was simply not allowed. Holiday was drawn to people, not genders, a fact that didn't fit the narrative her managers and record labels wanted. She had intimate relationships with women, including actress Talula Bankhead. Yes, that Talula. The two were inseparable for years, their closeness chalked up to intense friendship by those who couldn't or wouldn't see the truth. Any hint of her desirability was erased, not only by her handlers, but by history itself. Yet, the evidence is there, in her letters, her circle, and the coded lyrics of her songs. Holiday was a survivor, constantly forced to choose which parts of herself to protect. Even as she became a symbol for the downtrodden, she was living out a secret that today's stars might shout from the rooftops. Billie's legacy? That nobody, no matter how powerful, can ever control your heart. Grace Jones. Grace Jones doesn't just break rules, she vaporizes them. The Jamaican-born singer, model, and actress turned the 80s into her personal runway, pairing gender-bending style with a don't-care-who's-watching energy. Her bisexuality? Just one more way Jones refused to play by anyone's script. In a time when androgyny was a career risk, Jones flirted with men and women publicly, making lovers and headlines with equal ease. But her record label's response was straight from the old playbook. Keep it ambiguous, keep it marketable. Interviews tiptoed around her love life, turning her relationships with women into edgy fashion statements rather than stories of real intimacy. Jones, of course, wouldn't have it. She pushed every boundary, leaving managers scrambling to explain her eccentricities to the press. Her music videos and performances weren't coded. They were defiant, loud, and often unapologetically queer. Jones' influence on fashion, music, and pop culture is immeasurable, and her bisexuality is just part of her arsenal. If anyone ever proved the studio system couldn't bottle lightning, it's Grace. Janice Joplin. Janice Joplin was pure dynamite, raw, unfiltered, and always half a step from the edge. As the queen of late 60s counterculture, her voice roared with a desperation that came from living outside every boundary. But while her medication use and heartbreaks were public knowledge, her bisexuality was almost entirely erased from the record. Joplin had passionate relationships with men and women. Her letters and biographies are littered with names and stories the press never touched. Her managers knew, her bandmates knew, but the official story was all about her wild romances with men. Anything else was brushed aside as bohemian experimentation. After all, the industry could handle a wild woman, but not one who refused to pick a side. What's wild is how much Joplin's true story still resonates. Her desirability was as much a part of her rebellion as her voice, challenging every idea about what a female rock star was supposed to be. Joplin didn't live long enough to see the world change, but her legend only grows. She showed everyone that honesty, no matter how inconvenient, is always the most punk rock move. Lili Reinhardt. For millions, Lili Reinhardt is Betty Cooper, wholesome, wide-eyed, and straight out of a comic book. But off-screen, Reinhardt is all about defying expectations, especially when it comes to her sexuality. In 2020, she casually came out as bisexual on Instagram, telling fans she'd long been attracted to both men and women. What she didn't say, but everyone with industry experience knows, that openness would have been a career ender just a few years earlier. Publicists and agents once pressured Reinhardt to stick to the girl-next-door script. Her love life was curated for fans, and any hint of queerness was redirected into rumors or friendship gossip. But Reinhardt's generation isn't about hiding, and when she spoke up, it was on her own terms, not a manager's. Instead of sinking her career, it won her more fans, showing just how much the Hollywood playbook has changed. Reinhardt's story isn't just about one person. It's about a new wave of actors refusing to play parts off-screen. She's still Betty, but she's also fully herself, a little subversive, a little bit rebel, and a whole lot more than the studios bargained for. Dove Cameron's Disney image was as squeaky clean as they come, but anyone paying attention could see the cracks. Cameron grew up under the microscope, her every move managed by the same machine that made and broke so many young stars before her. Yet, when she came out as bisexual, calling herself super queer, she didn't do it with a tabloid exclusive or a PR blitz. She just said it on her own social media like it was no big deal.
Just not believe me that I was queer. I know that's like a crazy thing to be afraid of, but in this day and age...
Behind the scenes, though, it was a seismic shift. Cameron's management, keen to protect her brand, had spent years steering her away from any controversy. Relationships with men were celebrated. Close friendships with women were explained away.
So do I, as if like I wasn't... You know what I mean? It's like it just feels equal, like the two of us meeting in the middle of this like little time capsule-y song.
It's the same old studio trick. Let the audience believe what they want, just never let the real story out. But Cameron refused to be boxed in, trading her sanitized image for something more authentic. Her music videos, interviews, and even her fashion began to reflect her real self.
It's where they all come to, you know, picnic. Not that I've been here before.
Cameron's coming out wasn't just a moment, it was a break, with a century of tradition and a signal to millions of fans that it's okay to write your own narrative. Janelle Monai. Janelle Monai is a one-woman revolution, singer, actor, visionary, and a style icon whose queerness is woven into every note. Early in her career, the industry tried to sell her as mysterious, letting her be weird as long as she didn't spell out the details. But Monai was never interested in hiding. When she came out as pansexual and bisexual, it was with the kind of defiance that made her an instant hero to fans everywhere. Labels and publicists flinched, worried her honesty would scare off mainstream listeners. They pushed for universality, which is Hollywood code for "don't say you're queer." But Monai's artistry couldn't be contained. Every album, every red carpet, every performance was a celebration of difference and defiance. By refusing to play it safe, Monai redefined what a pop star could be and what kind of love stories belong in the spotlight. Her unapologetic bisexuality isn't just a detail, it's a central part of her message. No matter what the system says, you get to decide who you are. Halsy. Halsy's voice is an anthem for outsiders, but her story is straight out of the old Hollywood playbook, at least at first. As a breakout star, Halsy was pushed to keep her relationships with women quiet, told that bisexuality was bad for business. Management steered her away from talking too much, and interviewers were coached to stick to the script. But Halsy, raised on the internet and armed with a punk streak, refused to cooperate. She came out publicly and loudly, using her platform to challenge not just stereotypes, but the entire machine that tried to keep her identity secret. In interviews, she's blasted the music industry for biphobia, called out double standards, and demanded more visibility for the BI community. Halsy's refusal to stay quiet turned her into a lightning rod for change. Instead of derailing her career, her honesty made her a bigger star. She's proof that even in a world that loves secrets, being loud and proud is still the surest way to win. Demi Lovato. Demi Lovato's life has played out in public. Triumphs, breakdowns, comebacks, and all. But when it came to sexuality, Lovato's journey was a tug-of-war between personal truth and industry image. For years, their relationships with women were kept off the record, with management warning that coming out could sink their pop career. Lovato eventually came out as bisexual, then later as pansexual and non-binary. But before that, it was a long slog of strategic silence. Romantic lyrics were left gender-neutral, and interviewers avoided the topic altogether. When rumors did leak, PR teams spun them as friendships or just rumors. It was a classic case of the closet by committee. But Lovato's eventual public honesty has been nothing short of revolutionary. They've since used their fame to advocate for LGBTQ rights, turning their own struggle into a source of empowerment for others. Lovato's story is proof that the industry can try to shape you, but the truth, once spoken, can reshape the industry. Jason Mraz. Jason Mraz is the kind of guy who always seemed to be singing about sunshine, simple love, and the sweet things in life. But beneath the breezy melodies was a story the music industry never wanted front and center. Mraz came out as bisexual in 2018, writing a letter to the LGBTQ community in which he casually dropped, "I am by your side." Classic Mraz. A pun, a wink, and a revelation all at once. It was news to most fans, but not to insiders who knew that Mraz's relationships hadn't always been limited to women. Early in his career, labels and managers nudged him to keep things relatable for the mainstream, a code word for straight. Hints about his love life were softened in interviews, and lyrics were kept safely ambiguous. While Mraz was never about shock value, he was also never about lying, and eventually, he let the truth shine through. When Mraz came out, there was a ripple of surprise, but also an outpouring of love from fans who appreciated his honesty. Rather than shrink, his audience grew. It turns out, authenticity goes perfectly with a little sunshine. The industry's old rules? Totally outdated, just like the idea that bisexual stars need to stay hidden. Anna Paquin. Anna Paquin doesn't do subtle. When she came out as bisexual in 2010, it wasn't a quiet confession in the back pages of a magazine. It was part of a public service announcement for LGBTQ equality. At the time, Paquin was at the height of her True Blood fame, playing a character whose love life was about as complicated as television gets. Off-screen, the studios preferred to keep things less interesting.
He was very nervous, I think, just because it is a scary thing.
PR teams tried to spin Paquin as a typical Hollywood starlet, all red carpets and tabloid-friendly romances. When she married co-star Stephen Moyer, it was treated as the ultimate happily ever after, but the industry's love of straight-washing couldn't erase her truth. Paquin was always clear about her bisexuality, refusing to be boxed in by anyone's expectations. What really makes Paquin's story stand out is her zero-tolerance policy for biphobia on social media, in interviews, everywhere. She's called out anyone who tries to question the legitimacy of her identity, proving that being married to a man doesn't erase her queerness. Paquin's courage isn't just in her roles, it's in her refusal to let anyone else write her narrative. Amber Heard. For Amber Heard, the closet wasn't just a metaphor. It was a place her managers desperately tried to keep her in. Heard burst onto the scene as a Hollywood starlet with edge, but behind the glamour, her relationships with women were kept under wraps by a publicity machine that wanted her to be marketable to everyone and controversial to no one. Heard first came out publicly in 2010, holding hands with photographer Tasia Van Ree on red carpets.
I did. He's in LA right now doing some construction on my house.
He's like a man's man. The response from the studio system? Damage control. Heard was advised to play down her bisexuality, with PR teams spinning the relationship as a phase or just friends. At every turn, industry insiders warned her that honesty could cost her roles, especially in the franchise-heavy, image-obsessed world of blockbusters. But Heard refused to play the game. She's since become an outspoken advocate for LGBTQ rights, using her platform to challenge both industry hypocrisy and media stereotypes. The backlash hasn't stopped her. If anything, it's made her more defiant. Heard's story is a reminder that in Hollywood, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to hide. Jillian Anderson. Jillian Anderson made her name playing skeptical FBI agent Dana Scully, but her real life has always been stranger and more daring than fiction. Anderson has spoken openly about her relationships with both men and women, but you wouldn't know it from her early career press, which carefully curated her as the thinking man's dream. In the late 90s, any hint of queerness was quickly erased by nervous publicists who leaned hard on Anderson's relationships with men. Even after she found fame, Anderson's bisexuality was treated as a footnote, not a headline.
I'd be standing up for a shot and then they'd run over an apple box, which is a box that I'm normally standing on.
Interviews glossed over her personal life, and Anderson herself later admitted that coming out was something she delayed because of the industry's expectations. That changed as Anderson took control of her own narrative. She's since become one of the most visible bisexual women in the industry, often speaking about her attraction to women and the importance of representation. What's most powerful? Anderson's refusal to let her past define her future. She's proven that you can be both a leading lady and completely, unapologetically, yourself. Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie was the tabloid queen of the 2000s, a homewrecker, an action hero, a humanitarian, and, at the time, the most lusted-after woman in the world. What didn't make the splashy magazine covers was her bisexuality. Jolie has always been open about her attraction to women, famously saying she had loved women in the past and would probably do so again. The studios, however, had no interest in an openly bisexual action star. Jolie's early relationships with women were dismissed as wild phases or explained away by PR reps. Even as she started a family with Brad Pitt and became Hollywood royalty, there was a concerted effort to edit her queer history from the official story. It was as if admitting bisexuality would somehow break the fantasy of Angelina as the world's ultimate straight pinup.
I think that's just, to be somebody who's comfortable with other people, maybe not understanding who you are.
Jolie, ever the rebel, has never played along. She's been a loud, proud advocate for LGBTQ rights, and her honesty paved the way for other A-list stars to follow suit. Jolie's bisexuality isn't a scandal, it's part of her power. And the fact that the studios tried so hard to erase it, that's the real punchline. Amandla Stenberg. Amandla Stenberg is a new kind of Hollywood trailblazer, one who refuses to let old rules stand. From the Hunger Games to The Hate U Give, Stenberg has made a career out of challenging stereotypes and breaking down barriers. Their bisexuality isn't just part of their identity, it's part of their activism.
That means something.
It's kind of, I guess, like a prophecy. That's the way I like to look at it.
When Stenberg came out as bisexual in 2016, it was in a heartfelt, matter-of-fact video on social media. No press conference, no strategic leak, just honesty. But behind the scenes, publicists fretted about the impact on Stenberg's brand. Hollywood still had doubts about whether an openly queer actor could be a leading star, especially a young one. The studio machine's solution? Push Stenberg as an ally, or keep the spotlight on their activism, not their sexuality. But Stenberg wouldn't let the truth be sanitized. Their openness has made them a role model for young fans everywhere. And their career hasn't just survived, it's thrived. Stenberg's story is proof that the new Hollywood isn't about hiding. It's about leading with your full self, no apologies. Cameron Diaz. Cameron Diaz built her brand on being the sunniest, most approachable rom-com queen of the early 2000s. Studios loved her, publicists worshipped her, and everyone wanted to believe that what you saw on screen was exactly what you got in real life. But Diaz has always hinted that she's lived a lot more boldly off-screen than the tabloids let on. In a 2014 interview, Diaz admitted to having been with women, shrugging it off as just another part of life's adventure. That one-liner made waves, but the studio spin machine worked overtime to play it down. Just curiosity. Nothing serious.
You mean...
He's a murderer. Yeah.
like an actual convicted murderer?
He killed people. I know, it's crazy.
For years, her image was strictly policed. Fun, but safe. Flirtatious, but always returning to safe ground. What's striking is how comfortable Diaz became with her own story as the years passed. She never let anyone else define her, refusing to get boxed in by old stereotypes. Even as her film roles slowed down, her confidence in her truth only grew. Diaz proves you can be America's sweetheart and still break the mold Hollywood desperately tries to preserve. Cara Delevigne. Cara Delevigne exploded onto the scene with a runway walk and a don't-care-what-you-think attitude that fashion had never seen before. But as she moved into acting, the studio machine tried to sand down the edges, worried her bisexuality and gender fluidity would be confusing to audiences. Delevigne was having none of it. Open about her relationships with women, including singer St. Vincent, she's used her platform to demand more visibility for bisexual and queer people. Industry PRs initially tried to brand her as just experimenting, using her relationships as edgy clickbait while downplaying their legitimacy. But Delevigne outsmarted the system, making her desirability a key part of her personal brand. She's been vocal about the pressures to stay closeted and the harm that does to young fans. In the end, her honesty has helped redefine what a young star can look and love like, and made her a fashion and film icon for a generation. Stephanie Beatriz. Stephanie Beatriz turned heads as the deadpan, tough-as-nails detective Rosa Diaz on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but her real-life story is just as bold. Beatriz came out as bisexual in 2016, posting about it openly on social media, a move that took serious guts in an industry still nervous about out and proud actors. Before coming out, Beatriz played along with the industry's safe narrative. Interviews focused on her relationships with men. Her bisexuality was something she shared with friends, not fans. But Beatriz got tired of pretending.
Yo, I looked at the photos of your victim on your desk.
Is that Rosa? Tell her I said hi.
The puncture wounds are similar to a case I had a while back.
She wanted to be a role model for others struggling with the same silence. Since coming out, Beatriz has become one of TV's most visible bi icons, on and off screen. She's made it clear that her career isn't a fluke or a charity case. It's proof that Hollywood needs more diversity, not less. Her story is a victory for authenticity over old-school caution. Kristen Stewart. Kristen Stewart's Hollywood journey began as a Twilight teen idol, and the studio system went into overdrive to keep her image squeaky clean and oh-so heterosexual. But Stewart never played by the rules, and as soon as she could, she flipped the script. She came out as bisexual, then clarified she's not confused, and let her relationships with women play out in public. Tabloid frenzy be damned. Early on, PR teams tried to hide her relationships, coaching her on what to say and what not to say. But Stewart's glare is as real off-screen as on. She refused to let anyone tell her who to love or how to live, quickly becoming one of Hollywood's most visible bisexual stars. Stewart's journey from hidden romance to walking red carpets with her girlfriends has made her a queer icon for a whole generation. She's proof that you can't build a lasting legacy on lies, and that sometimes the bravest thing a star can do is stop hiding and just be real. Kristen Bell. Kristen Bell is America's favorite quirky, big-hearted sweetheart, a Disney princess, and the voice of every millennial's inner monologue. But what most fans didn't know for years is that Belle has always been open about sexuality, including her attraction to women. Hollywood PR teams and family-friendly branding tried to erase the bi from her personal narrative, nudging her into the relatable mom lane and steering the press away from anything not Disney-approved.
I'm right in the middle of giving a swim lesson.
Oh, sorry.
What are you wearing?
Oh, it's my uniform.
But Belle never played coy. In interviews, she's spoken candidly about her past experiences, always with humor and zero shame. Her honesty about relationships, regardless of gender, was a quiet revolution in an industry allergic to nuance. While she's happily married to Dax Shepard, Belle has refused to let that define her entire identity, often taking to social media to debunk biphobic myths and champion LGBTQ+ causes. What's especially powerful about Belle's approach is her refusal to treat her desirability as a scandal or a secret. For her, it's just one part of a much bigger picture. She's showing Hollywood, and every fan who grew up with her, that authenticity isn't just an act. It's the best role you'll ever play, even if the studios don't write it into the script. Renee Arap. Renee Arap is rewriting the musical theater playbook with her powerhouse voice and brash confidence, but it's her candor about desirability that truly sets her apart. Rising to fame on Broadway and then the coitus lives of college girls, Arap has never shied away from calling herself bisexual, sometimes on stage, sometimes on Twitter, always on her own terms. Early on, agents advised her to keep it vague for mainstream appeal. It's the oldest trick in the book. Make the music big, but keep your real self small. Arap's response? Belt louder. She regularly pokes fun at Hollywood's double standards and has openly critiqued the pressure to play straight for the sake of landing more roles. By refusing to play the studio game, Arap has become a symbol for young fans who see themselves in her story. She's proof that you can build a career on being fully, messily yourself, even if it makes the suits sweat. In an industry still clinging to old prejudices, Arap is a much-needed dose of reality and a star who insists that honesty is always in style. Kit Connor. Kit Connor's rise was meteoric, thanks to his breakout performance in Heartstopper, a show that finally gave queer teens the representation they deserve. But when Connor was pressured to label his desirability by fans and the media, it exposed just how little Hollywood and even the woke corners of fandom has changed. Connor eventually came out as bisexual, but not because he wanted to. It was because he felt forced. The old studio system loved a good coming-of-age story, but hated one that challenged the status quo. PR teams have always tried to keep young actors on the safe track, where desirability is marketable, but never too real. Connor's ordeal showed that the industry still doesn't know how to handle real people with real lives, preferring the comfort of a controlled narrative. Connor's reluctant honesty struck a chord with millions. It's a reminder that forcing people out of the closet isn't progress.
I just think if my history teacher looked like that, I might actually pay attention and maybe understand.
Oh, we're moving on. It's just another version of the same old oppression. Hollywood's lesson here? Let stars tell their stories their way, or risk getting left behind by a generation that's tired of playing pretend. Aubrey Plaza. Aubrey Plaza's comedy is deadpan, off-kilter, and impossible to box in, just like her personal life. Plaza came out as bisexual in a 2016 interview, nonchalantly declaring, "I fall in love with girls and guys." For most of her career, studios and agents played up her oddball persona while scrubbing her desirability from her public image. After all, quirky sells, but queer was still seen as risky.
Why are you like this? Because I'm insane. And I've been waiting to do this show since I was 12 years old. What's happening? Shut up.
Plaza ignored the memo. She's made her bisexuality part of her public persona, dropping it into late-night interviews and playing queer characters on screen. She's refused to edit herself for mass consumption, and fans have responded by making her a cult favorite. What's wild is how her honesty has only made her more magnetic. Plaza shows that being authentically strange and shamelessly yourself is more bankable than any manufactured image. She's proof that when you own your story, you become unforgettable, even if the studio system still hasn't figured out why. Mae Whitman. Mae Whitman grew up in the industry, going from adorable kid star in Parenthood to scene-stealing voice in The Owl House and Good Girls. But while her career blossomed, her desirability was kept on the down low, first by protective agents, then by the lingering stigma in Hollywood against openly bisexual actors. Whitman changed that with a simple, heartfelt tweet, coming out as pansexual and bisexual, and making it clear she was done playing it safe. For years, the press stuck to the girl-next-door narrative.
I like that she's interesting. I like that she's a little darker.
Keeping things simple for marketing. But Whitman's coming out shattered that. Her openness has made her a role model for younger fans and a challenge to the old guard. Whitman's story is about reclaiming space in kids' TV, in grown-up drama, and in an industry still slow to catch up with real life. By stepping into the light, she's made it a little easier for the next generation to do the same. Rita Ora. Rita Ora is a pop phenomenon, known for chart-topping hits and high-octane performances. But when it comes to her sexuality, Ora's story is pure old-school Hollywood. Publicists insisted on ambiguity, while the press ran wild with speculation. Ora came out as bisexual in 2018, weaving her truth into her music with lyrics that celebrate love without boundaries. The industry's response? A mix of awkward silence and nervous attempts to rebrand her image as inclusive but non-committal. Labels tried to spin her relationships with women as part of the artist lifestyle, never as something real. Ora, for her part, has pushed back, refusing to let anyone else define her identity. Her candidness has made her a lightning rod for conversations about bisexuality and visibility in pop. Ora's message is simple. Loving who you love shouldn't need a press release, and you don't owe anyone an explanation. Aussie Lust. Reality TV rarely gets credit for challenging social norms, but Aussie Lust has done just that. As a fan favorite on Survivor, Lust shattered stereotypes by coming out as bisexual, a move the show's producers didn't quite know how to handle. Reality TV has always loved dramatic reveals, but Lust's honesty about his desirability was something new. For years, Survivor stuck to the standard romance drama formula, pairing contestants into convenient narratives. Lust's announcement forced both the show and its audience to see a different kind of masculinity: confident, adventurous, and proudly bi. The aftermath was a masterclass in damage control, with press releases and interviews tiptoeing around the subject. But Lust's courage made him a role model for fans who saw themselves in his story. He proved that authenticity works even in the most artificial of settings, and that real representation is always worth the risk. Victoria Monet. Victoria Monet has been behind some of the biggest pop hits of the last decade, writing and performing with artists like Ariana Grande. But for much of her early career, Monet's bisexuality was treated like an inconvenient secret. Labels and managers wanted her to play the girl crush card for male fans, but stopped short of letting her own her identity publicly. Monet changed that with her music and social media presence, coming out and embracing her bisexuality as part of her creative brand. She's spoken openly about relationships with both men and women, and her lyrics leave nothing to the imagination. Her honesty hasn't just changed her own trajectory, it's helping to shift how the music industry talks about sexuality. Monet is proof that the most powerful stories are the ones we tell ourselves, not the ones handed to us by the old guard. Tom Robinson. Tom Robinson is a British rock legend and LGBTQ+ activist whose 1978 hit, Glad to Be Gay, became an anthem for a generation. But what most fans didn't realize at the time, Robinson is bisexual, not gay, and his personal journey with identity is just as groundbreaking as his music. Robinson's early career was marked by both support and skepticism. He was openly out. But
he spotted me and went, "Are you Tom Robinson, are you?" And I went,
the British music press wanted a gay spokesperson, not someone whose desirability challenged binary categories. Labels leaned into his activism while soft-pedaling the full story. Robinson refused to be typecast, writing candidly about his relationships with both men and women. He spent decades challenging myths about bisexuality and fighting for real representation. For Robinson, identity is a song that keeps evolving, and his willingness to keep singing it has changed lives around the world. Margaret Cho. Margaret Cho is comedy's ultimate truth-teller, a stand-up who turns pain and awkwardness into power. As one of the first Asian American comedians to hit it big, Cho already broke barriers, but her openness about bisexuality pushed the industry even further. For years, TV execs wanted her to play it safe, make jokes about dating, but never about loving women. Cho blew that rulebook to pieces, incorporating her bisexuality into her act, her writing, and her activism. She's spoken about the pressure to pick a side and how being honest about her desirability actually strengthened her comedy and career. Cho's refusal to play along with Hollywood's sanitized image machine has inspired countless others to do the same. She's living proof that the funniest stories, and the truest, are the ones that make you squirm a little. Lauren Jauregui. Lauren Jauregui went from Fifth Harmony pop star to solo artist and outspoken activist, all while navigating an industry notorious for packaging its stars in neat, straight-coded boxes. Jauregui came out as bisexual in an open letter to fans, calling out the hypocrisy of a music scene that loves edginess but flinches at real LGBTQ+ stories. Early on, PR teams tried to shape her image as the hot one for male fans, pushing her to keep her private life private. Jauregui's response? Put it all on the record. She's become a beacon for bi fans around the world, using her music and her platform to talk openly about love, identity, and the freedom to define yourself. Jauregui proves you can't keep the truth in a closet, even one lined with gold records. Cynthia Erivo. Cynthia Erivo is an acting and vocal powerhouse whose performances have stunned Broadway and Hollywood. But while the studios love her talent, they weren't ready for her honesty about being bisexual. As a Black woman in a notoriously white, straight industry, Erivo faced double scrutiny over how she presented herself. PR teams urged discretion, but Erivo refused to be anything but herself. She's spoken movingly about her relationships with both men and women, and about the importance of authentic visibility. For Erivo, every performance is a chance to claim space and to make it clear that true artistry doesn't fit inside anyone else's rules. Her story is one of defiance and grace, showing Hollywood that representation isn't just about who gets cast, it's about who gets to be real. Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir is best known as a philosopher and feminist icon, but her personal life was just as revolutionary. Living in the intellectual salons of Paris, de Beauvoir openly pursued relationships with both men and women, flouting the conventions of her time. The literary establishment tried to keep her image respectable, downplaying her bisexuality in favor of focusing on her intellectual partnership with Jean-Paul Sartre. But de Beauvoir wrote her own story. Her letters and memoirs reveal a woman unafraid to love boldly and challenge the status quo. She showed that identity isn't just about who you love, but how bravely you live. De Beauvoir's life is a reminder that history, like Hollywood, always tries to smooth the edges, but real stories never fit the mold. Alan Cumming. Alan Cumming is the ultimate Hollywood chameleon, Broadway showstopper, blockbuster villain, indie darling, and bisexual icon all rolled into one. But that last title didn't come easily. In the 90s and early 2000s, even as Cummings' fame soared with roles in The Anniversary Party, Cabaret, and X2, X-Men United, studio execs pushed him to keep things ambiguous. Bisexuality, they said, was too confusing for the mainstream. Publicists wanted him to play up romances with women and keep everything else off the record. Cumming, however, had other ideas. He came out as bisexual in interviews and in his writing, refusing to let anyone minimize or erase any part of his identity. Hollywood's response? Nervous laughter, PR spin, and a quiet worry that Cummings' honesty might limit his roles. But Cumming proved the exact opposite. Embracing his full self only made him more magnetic. He shattered casting stereotypes, played straight, gay, bi, and everything in between, and still became a Tony winner and Emmy nominee. Beyond the stage and screen, Cumming became an outspoken advocate for bisexual visibility, calling out the erasure that plagues both the industry and the LGBTQ+ community. He's shown a new generation that there's power in living out loud, and that Hollywood can't box you in if you refuse to play along. Billie Joe Armstrong. Punk rock has always been about smashing the rules, and Billie Joe Armstrong, Green Day's frontman, lives that ethos in every chord and every confession. But even in the chaos of the 90s punk revival, Armstrong's bisexuality was a line the music industry didn't want to cross. Labels and publicists loved his rebellion, so long as it stayed straight. When Armstrong casually mentioned his bisexuality in a 1995 interview, saying, "I think I've always been bisexual," the fallout was immediate. PR teams worked overtime to walk it back, suggesting it was just provocation for the press. But Armstrong didn't retreat. He doubled down, speaking about the fluidity of love and desire in a scene that was still deeply heteronormative. Fans found freedom in his honesty, and punk purists were forced to confront their own stereotypes. Green Day's music, already bristling with angst and nonconformity, gained new depth as Armstrong infused it with the reality of living outside the lines. Years later, Armstrong's openness is part of his legacy. He's proof that punk isn't just about sound, it's about the courage to speak your truth, even when the business would rather you didn't. In a world that still tries to closet its icons, Armstrong's story is a mosh pit of defiance and pride. So, how many of these legends did you know were hiding a whole other story behind the studio gloss? Hollywood built its empire on secrets, but the truth always finds a way to slip through the cracks, and today, those cracks are wide open. If you loved peeling back the celluloid, drop a comment with the biggest surprise on this list, or your own Hollywood theories. Smash subscribe, hit share, and remember, the juiciest stories are the ones you're not supposed to know.